Well, good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you. It's nice to be here in this, I guess, fairly extraordinary IATEFL conference. I've started to feel kind of a bit more excited about it now, but it's been an interesting journey coming up here. Can you all just say a quick hello to me so I can see that you're there, actually, because I'm sitting here and feeling rather alone. I can hear you. That's better. Now I feel like I'm with some people. Hooray. Okay. As I say, I'm working out this platform as we go along as well, but I'd always like to start these sessions with just finding out a little bit about whether people know me or not. Oh, someone says, can I turn my mic on? Can you not hear me? I think I've got my mic on.
The mic is
You can
on.
hear me, yeah. Okay, great. Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, so could you just put in the chat quickly, please? And number one, number two, or number three. Either you know me, or you think you've kind of got an idea of me, or you haven't got a clue and you just thought you'd come along anyway. Oh, okay, quite a few threes. That's nice. Okay, all right. Thanks for that. And so, just in sort of reciprocation, those of you who don't know me, I've got a website, elttrain.com. I'm a teacher educator. I make a lot of videos particularly for novice teachers and trainees. And in reciprocation, I guess, could you tell me, who are you? What's your interest in being here? Do you give feedback to people, to novice teachers, to practicing teachers? Are you a teacher trainer, teacher educator? What would you call yourself? A manager? Okay. Teacher educator, teacher trainers, does feedback to Sam. How can you unmute Joe? I think everybody can hear me, Sam. So I'm not sure what the issue is. Oh. Okay, quite a few different people there. Some people who I know well. That's nice. So what I want to talk about really today, this talk was conceived obviously a long time ago, as we all know. We all put in these proposals nearly 2 years ago, and so life has changed quite a lot in that time. And so if you come expecting a role play, I'm really sorry, but I've had to make some adjustments because we kind of breakout rooms here. So we are going to do things a little bit differently, but I am hopefully still going to try and get you involved. So I'd like to start by thinking about this question. Why should I reflect on my observation practice? So I'm guessing that all of you in the room, it looks from what you've said, that everybody in the room is involved in giving feedback to teachers in some way. And I think we don't often get any feedback on this ourselves. It's a sort of a process that we often have to learn to do as we go along, as best we can. It's very rare to be observed doing feedback unless you're perhaps a CELTA tutor and the assessor comes in. And even then, they're probably not going to give you any detailed feedback. So it's quite rare to get any feedback on your feedback. Out of interest, has anybody ever had feedback on their feedback? And how we receive feedback. Yeah, that's certainly true. Part of your training, yes, I guess it happens then. That's fair enough. Ask trainees for it. That's always nice. I think that's really empowering, actually, for trainees. Okay. Non-verbal, right? Okay. Okay. So I think, it's not just about why necessarily we should do it, but perhaps how we should do it. And I think asking the people that you're giving feedback to is a really great idea. Arguably, there's quite a power imbalance there, and they're unlikely to say anything particularly negative to you, especially if you're in the position of assessing them, perhaps after the event, I guess. But I want to have a look at one way that I think is really important, and I come back to this more and more and more as I go down my professional journey route, and that's that it's just no good thinking about what you did. you really have to record yourself. You have to work from the data. You have to record yourself, either video or audio. Audio's fine, that's enough actually, I think. Video's nicer, but it's more intrusive. And unless you're actually listening back to what you really said, it's just not enough. So again, I'm going to ask you a question so I don't feel like I'm here alone in my bedroom. How many of you have recorded yourselves? Rachel has, Maria has. Okay, a lot haven't. I understand. We're all reluctant to do this because we know it's quite a harsh mirror, perhaps. But I think it's really useful. And one of the kind of advantages, the few advantages perhaps of being online, particularly if you're in Zoom or Teams or something of that nature, is it's super easy to record yourself. You don't have to set up anything separately. You can just press record. And obviously you should ask for anyone's permission who you're talking to if you're going to record. But I think as long as you tell people that it's for your development and you're interested in working on your own practice, then I think very few people are going to object, as long as they know it's not going to go on YouTube or anything like that. I also think it's actually quite a positive thing. If you're giving feedback to people and you're saying, actually, I want to work on my practice too, then I think there's a kind of a reciprocalness, whatever the word is, whatever the noun is for that, a reciprocation, I suppose, between those two things, which is helpful. I want to show you something, and it's about the power of slowing things down. So this is a video of Jelly being hit with a tennis racket. Now at that speed you can see nothing, but if you watch again a bit slower, now see what happens.
It looks like an amoeba. Yeah, it's like you're hitting a rainbow egg that just erupts into absolute beauty. Look at that. And suddenly a rainbow was born. Wow. That's pretty cool. That's sweet. That's bloody cool. You can see every individual colour. It literally looks like a rainbow that's been formed out of giant wormy rain droplets. It looks like a unicorn sneezed. I would hate to be on the bottom end of that.
So slowing things down. You can't see anything. Could anybody see anything? No? Couldn't see my... Oh, crikey.
No, there is visual.
Now there's visual. Before, did you see the video? Did you see the video? No. Did anybody see the video? Slides seem to be frozen. Oh, God. So some people saw the video and some didn't. How strange. Well, I think I'm going to go on anyway, but it's a video from the slow. This might be problematic because the video, we've mentioned it like a sneezing unicorn. Yes, okay, so obviously some of you did see it. I hope that enough did that it made sense. Slowing things down, I think, is important because it shows things up. And the way that you can slow your feedback down is to transcribe it. Now, you're going to say to me, transcribing is so much work, Jo. It's just so much work. Again, so I ask you, has anybody ever transcribed their feedback? Oh, Rachel, you're way ahead of me. Okay, Rachel's way ahead of me. Rachel can go and find somebody else to listen to. The rest of you, okay, that's good. So, Otter is exactly what I'm going to suggest. I discovered this program fairly recently and it's fantastic. So you can use the free version for a certain number of minutes. It's certainly enough to do 1 or 2 feedback things. It's you get a certain number of minutes per month, and then afterwards you have to pay for it. It's cheap if you want to pay for it, but it's there is a free version. And what you do with Otter is that you can just drag and drop a file. This could be an audio file or a video file, and then it transcribes it all for you. Now, it doesn't do a perfect job, but it does a pretty good job. It does a pretty accurate job. And once you've got this job up like this, and it divides it into speakers it thinks, although again, it's not always accurate, you can edit it. Can you see my mouse here? So you can edit it, and there's an edit button at the top. And when you go to the edit button, you get a screen that looks like this. And you can edit it so that you can name the speaker. You can change speaker 2 to whoever it was, and you can edit it, and you can play along. So when you click this play button at the bottom, it will play, and you'll see highlighted in blue the words that are there. And the great advantage of this is that it just slows things down for you, and it makes the task of transcribing manageable. So instead of being this mammoth task, which is, you know, really, oh God, it's such a faff and I'm not going to do it because it takes too much time and I haven't got time, it makes it into a task which is, it still takes a little bit of time, but it's interesting and it's easy to change and it keeps you interested and it slows that thing down. So I can't recommend this enough. I just love it. It certainly made my PhD research much easier. Christian says only found expensive software. Well, as I say, this is free for a certain amount of minutes, and I think it's about $5 a month otherwise, which is, I think a small amount of money. But you can certainly do enough to do 1 or 2 free. So what we're going to try to look at is I'm going to think about what should you reflect on about your practice. And I want to show you some data from my PhD research. So this is novice mentors giving feedback and helping their mentees to prepare lessons and looking at the kind of things that come up in this practice. So the sort of things that perhaps it might be interesting to look at. Now, I'm going to play you an extract, and I really hope that you'll be able to hear it. Again, before some people could hear the audio and some people couldn't. I don't understand why. I just have to go ahead, I'm afraid. I've got 2 questions that I would like to show you. So the mentor's name is Miranda, that's her pseudonym. How does she make suggestions about the lesson? This was a lesson preparation. They'd done the mentee had done the lesson before. She was now going to do it again, trying to improve it, and they were having a conversation about how to improve it. So the mentor was very keen not to take over, but to make suggestions. So I want to know, how did she do that? What sort of verbal strategies did she use? And how does she make the mentee, whose name's Haywan, again a pseudonym, reflect on why this would be useful? So how did she make her think? How did she give us suggestions? How did she make her think? Right, let me hope that I can play this and you'll hear it.
But that idea was so amazing. Really? I really loved it. Maybe you can have them writing down. Yeah, so the previous last night just shared a picture of my shopaholic friends that in this time maybe I can give some context, like her name and how much she spends per month and what else. Like, would you like to use that idea that I gave you before about asking the questions, about having the students ask the questions? Oh, you could have them asking these questions about your friend, and then you answer. Do you know? How could you do that? For example, you have the picture of your friend, yeah? And then, instead of you saying, she spends this and that, she goes and buys this and that every time. So you can maybe show the picture and have them asking questions. Oh, yeah. You're like, what do you think about this one? Who is this person? Yeah. You can even... How does she look like? Exactly. You can even take a real friend and then show the picture. Or just my photos. My room picture. A lot of shoes and clothes. Yes. Why would that be nice? Maybe, actually, surprisingly, the instructors in our observation class, when they make some examples or some cases, they use themselves as an example or act like the person in the case, what they want to explain. So it's quite helpful to make engagement between the student and the teacher, because even though we borrow really perfect example from the outside, but actually student didn't have any relationship and engagement between that person.
So how does the mentor make suggestions about the lesson? Let's have a look at I'll give you hopefully as well you could see from that how Otter works. So you can see that it's like that and you can stop and start it and edit it. So it's really nice to be able to, to use that to transcribe. I find it so helpful. Sorry, sorry. So what kind of language did you hear that the mentor used to make suggestions? Did you hear anything from this? Okay, would you like to use? How would you do it? Maybe you could. So we've got quite a lot of hedging here. Yeah, would you like to? So she was giving suggestions, but she wasn't pushing this. Let me show you the transcript. So if we look here, we've got this suggestion here. Would you like to use that idea that I gave you before? So she's giving her the possibility of this, but she's not pushing it and saying you should. And actually, I think Haywan there sounded quite surprised, as if she'd kind of forgotten that. And again, she's saying, yeah, you could have them asking these questions. So, how could you do that? She does then go on and tell her how she could do it. But her intonation is definitely questioning. She's not pushing this. She's giving it as a suggestion, as something useful. And I think, in this sort of situation, it's really important. Giving novice mentees who don't have much of an idea about teaching, giving them concrete ideas, they tend to find very, very helpful. But she's putting it forward in a way which I feel is a question. It's a suggestion. It's definitely not something which, I really feel you should do this. And she's bringing it forward. Yeah, you can even have, I think the next slide, you can even take a real friend and then show the picture. So again, building on this idea, but not pushing it. And then what I think is really nice is this, where she asks, yes, why? Why would that be nice? So she's actually delving into this and not just saying, here's an idea, but she's actually giving her an opportunity to think about the pedagogical implications of this and why that might be helpful. So it's something personal, you're personalising the lesson. So I think that this kind of thing where you, as a mentor, as a giver of feedback, as a person who's helping someone to develop their practice, is that you're not just telling them what to do and you're helping them to explore that. So educative mentoring, I guess Feynman Nemser calls this. Let's move on a little bit further. There's Another example I've got here, and I'd like you to look this time at what kind of hedging strategy. We've already had a look at hedging strategies a little bit. So I want you to have a look again at in more depth. Here's a transcript with Miranda and Haywan. I want you to look here at what exactly does she say which hedges her suggestions. This part of the transcript this is actually from a feedback extract. So she was giving her feedback on her lesson. She'd asked Haywan, first of all, tell me what you think. And then this was what happened next. There were some issues about giving instructions in L1. So have a look at that. I'm just going to shut up for a minute and let you have a look. Please post in the chat what you think you see here as hedging her language, as making it softer. Told you it was a workshop. You've got to actually do some work. Might give, maybe, yeah. Modal verbs, okay, slightly different, absolutely. So I think that these kind of things are really useful to think about in your own practice. So if you've got the opportunity to record what you say, to transcribe it so that it's slowed down so you can actually see what you say, you might well be surprised. Marianne, yeah, relating it to her own experience, I think that empathy with somebody, I completely agree. So the bits I've highlighted here are this. So I really like this. Basically, you told me about 3 things. So she's reflecting it back on the 3 things that the mentee already talked about. So she's taking that as a starting point. And then she says this, I also use some L1 when I'm teaching because sometimes the students need that. So I think that, potentially it's L1 could be seen as the enemy here, that you're not really supposed to do that. We're not supposed to do that anymore. The mentor is actually from Brazil. She's not a first language English speaker either. And she's expressing empathy, saying, yes, I know that. I do that sometimes. And sometimes the students need that. So she's really expressing not only empathy, but a kind of approval for that. And then she's saying because of the context. Yeah, again, so she's, understanding what the person is saying. She's building rapport, building trust with her in order to then say, but have you thought? In order to say that, but maybe there is another way. Not that you're always bad, not that we're always terrible, not that I'm, discounting that, and I can see that you've got reasons, but have you thought about another way? And you might give clear instructions. Maybe you can develop a little bit more this way. So it's really, really hedged. Now, my feeling is that when anybody gives us feedback, if somebody says it just a little bit, a little bit of something critical, we all tend to hear a great mountain of criticality. So I think you probably don't need to say very much in order for someone to really hear it. And so I think that kind of wrapping things up in cotton wool is probably very helpful. Now, of course, there's a downside to this, and if you wrap it up in enough cotton wool, then people don't hear it. So there's always that balance to be had, and I think a lot of it obviously will depend on the relationship that you have. These two had an extraordinarily good relationship, and I think it was in no small part to the way in which Miranda built a rapport and was so warm and careful about how she delivered criticism to her mentee. Okay, let's have a look at another example. Here's another question about hedging. Now, this is something that I think is quite interesting. She used "I think" quite a lot. So I think you're doing well and a lot already. I think the next class will be even better. You made it memorable. I think they'll remember it forever. It was very smart of you, I think, to adapt the lesson plan. I think, again, is usually used as a kind of a softener, as something that's not so definite. Is there anything that you notice about these examples? And this was true of pretty much all the examples in this particular data set about the use of "I think." Ah, that's interesting, Laurie Moore. Stop hedging and tell them what to do. Again, it depends on the relationship you have with them, doesn't it? And the kind of people they are. So for sure, this is a client, and it's always, that's the skill, I think, of giving feedback, is making sure that you're at the right place at that client for that person and for that group of people. And the culture. Yeah, okay. So yeah, it's often followed by compliments. Anything else? Tone of it's important, of course, absolutely. Intonation here, we've lost intonation here, of course, which is why I wanted to show you that, the video. Yeah, the interesting thing I think here is that although this is a hedging strategy, it's always used, in this case, with positive things. So she's using, I think Fraser says it's used as a plausibility shield, or it functions as a politeness strategy. But here it's almost exclusively, she uses it to modify praise, not to modify criticism. And I wonder if this makes the praise less effective. So if I give you these two examples, what do you think? Which one sounds more positive, do you think? Yeah, I think we're probably pretty unanimous in this, aren't we? So, I think it softens things, so it makes things less forceful. So if you're giving praise, it also makes that less forceful. Any thoughts about, I say I'm planning on keeping you working a little bit at least. Any thoughts about why you think this might have been the case? Why the mentor might have used "I think you're doing well, I think you're doing a good job, blah, blah, blah." Start becoming complacent, okay, maybe that. Any other thoughts? I think it's something to do with the mentor as well, and she's, I think, for qualifying opinions. Yep, okay, so it is only, I guess it is only for his personal opinions. Why not for feedback too? Absolutely, I guess. Coming from a place of authority. Mentor doesn't want to sound like an expert. New to mentoring, aren't confident yet. Boosting it. I think that these are probably the reasons. Knowing, obviously I've got a lot more insider knowledge than you do on this. This particular mentor doesn't want to sound too assertive. Yeah, I think actually these were the reasons. So this mentor was new. She was an experienced teacher, but she'd never done any mentoring before, and she was very open about the fact that she felt a little bit nervous about being the expert, about giving her opinions. And I think that was probably why she was hedging, even when she was being very positive. I think it was about just a lack of confidence, perhaps nerves to some extent. Closing the gap between the mentor and the mentee. So I'm interested in what you think, because obviously the sort of things that are coming out here are that sometimes it might be about reducing the power differential or whatever else, not wanting to appear the expert. But as I say, I also think that there is an element of perhaps it reduces the impact of the praise there. Any thoughts on that? Do you feel that you do this? Are you aware of hedging these kind of things? Depends on why you're observing. Yes, that's certainly true. In this case, it was completely not for assessment. It was purely for support. So there was no assessment involved at all. They were, peers to some extent on an MA program, but one was an experienced teacher and one wasn't. Limits the subjectivity. It's an opinion, not the opinion. Okay, fair enough. So again, I ask you, do you feel that you hedge quite a lot with your feedback, or that you don't? What sort of things do you say? Are you aware of it? Trying to be more direct. I get Laurie after the feedback you got. Still feel uncomfortable. Yeah. So I think that was the case here. That's interesting. Probably should. Okay. Use more questions than statements. Okay. I mean, I guess using a questioning technique rather than making it a statement means that you are ultimately hedging, aren't you? To some extent, you're giving the authority more to the person, who you're giving feedback to. But again, it can vary. It varies a lot on who you're giving it to and why you're giving it. I think, Christian, you made that point. If you're giving feedback to very novice teachers or to trainees, then clearly they probably want a bit more of a direct approach. They often want to tell you what to do. Whereas if you're giving feedback to more experienced teachers as part of an ongoing development program or just quality assurance or whatever else, then clearly the expectation is that they're already doing a reasonable job in the classroom, and that it's your job to help them to see other things in the classroom and perhaps to have a discussion about their practice, in which case, why is always good. Absolutely, Laurie, I really like the question, why? Why did you do that? Or why is that a good idea? Or tell me more about that is, I find, quite useful. Language possibility, what need to work on. Okay, so Kristen talking about nationality stereotypes. Maybe not even just stereotypes, but certainly to individuals, I think it can, and that's, I've talked to quite a lot of different nationalities about this, because the mentors on the program that I've worked on have been from many different places, and I think people often do say, it's sometimes you get people. I did one young person, for example, who said, "No, just tell me. Just tell me. I don't want you to beat around the bush. Just tell me." And then in other places. But I think that often as well, it's about individuals' personality types rather than individual personality, rather than necessarily, the cultural thing. Okay. I've also had. I've got a little bit of time. I've also had the experience of having mentors, for example, Chinese mentees with Chinese mentors, and them doing it bilingually, either in Chinese or in English, and saying one of the top things that came out was that if we speak in Chinese, I'm able to be much more direct because we kind of understand each other better. And I don't think it's just about the language, it's about sort of the culture and how you can negotiate that in a foreign language. So that was quite interesting for me. Okay, just some final questions. I'm aware of time, and I do want to have a little bit of time for some discussion if possible. But I'd like to think about praise and how much explicit praise do you give, and what do you praise? So again, the chat, what do you think this is the case for you? Do you give a lot of explicit praise? What sort of things do you praise? Improvement. That's a nice idea, isn't it? It's not necessarily just the where you got to, but where you'd come from. Effort, yeah, absolutely. Specific things. Definitely, I think there's good research evidence that in order to be received, to be credible, praise is better if it's about something specific. Commitment, okay. Evidence, again, yeah. All these things are useful, I think. So again, this is from the same data. She had 2 feedback meetings. In the first, there were 5 uses of the word good. I use this as a sort of a marker of praise. And in the second feedback meeting, there were 7 uses of good. What do you notice about the difference? So there's more praise in the second one than the first one, but what do you notice also about what is praised here? Oh, a bit quiet. Present with a reason. Yeah. So I think, yeah, in the first feedback, there was a lot of, and I'm not. She did, a lot of saying, yes, absolutely perfect. So there was a lot of back-channeling, positive back-channeling like that. But in terms of specific praise, it was much more specific in the second feedback meeting. I think she'd really made an effort, and she discussed this afterwards, to saying that she really made an effort to praise more specifically. So the good voice tone, good to check their understanding. So it was much more specific, and I think that this is helpful. So if you're interested in this, I have some other sort of videos about this sort of stuff on a thing called CELTA Trainer Resources, not only for CELTA trainers, but that was who it was originally aimed at on my site on ELT training. But I'd like to have some time here for questions. I think what I've tried to show you, I suppose, is the points I'd like you to take away from this are: you should record yourself. You should transcribe it. Otter makes that very possible and very reasonable. And these are the sort of things that you might want to look for. So you might want to look at hedging, you might want to look at your questioning forms, you might want to look at your use of praise. These are the things that perhaps are some starting points for observation, self-observation. I'm going to stop sharing my slides now so that I'm just here. I want to have a look at what's going on. Work on some face tends to speak a lot. My feedback does. That's interesting. Wonder how it can be perceived as neither praising or giving critical feedback. To move towards area of neutrality, even if we're guiding. Yes, I think that's an interesting one, isn't it? That idea of neutrality, of perhaps having a conversation with somebody, rather than I'm pulling you down the path, I've got your hand and we're going along the path together. For me, one of the really telling metaphors for mentoring, for giving feedback, is that learning to dance with a new partner. So that idea of one person is leading, 2 people are doing the dance, and one person is definitely leading, but it's so subtle that it's really not easy to see who's leading, and they're only leading because the person who's being led is allowing that to happen, and is they're moving in synchronicity or whatever. So I think that for me is a really nice metaphor of what I see as good practice in mentoring and in feedback giving. How would you prepare to give feedback? That's a really good question. I think it depends how much time you've got, doesn't it? I think that for me, giving oral feedback, giving written feedback, those are 2 different things. That certainly with oral feedback, I would limit the number of things that I wanted to say to perhaps just 2, possibly 3 tops, in order to have that conversation, in order to prompt a discussion. knowing that I'm going to give them written feedback and anything else is going to be in there anyway. We see that mentees will also receive written feedback. In this case, they did receive written feedback. And I think that would very often be the case, wouldn't it? I mean, mostly, I think when you give feedback, it's like some written form as well. I don't see why there should be any case in which there isn't that. Should the implicit power balance be reduced? Look, I think yes, definitely. Because I think that where the power balance is reduced, you get more authenticity in that discussion. It's exactly like that dancing thing, isn't it? You can't dance with somebody if they're just holding you and moving around the classroom. You don't, or whatever, the dance floor. You don't get the same kind of learning unless somebody's really involved, and I think they're mainly involved if the power balance is reduced. But that can be really hard if you're in a position where you want to give them the best and move them forward towards achieving whatever it is, particularly if they're on a course and it's assessed. Very interested to start recording ourselves, also quite scary really. I think it is actually. It does require some courage, because nobody likes to listen to themselves. As soon as you do, you think, oh really, is that me? Do I really talk that much? I mean, I think that's one thing you can very easily do, is just count the words and see how many you say and how many they say. The dancing example isn't my example, and I've unfortunately forgotten off the top of my head what the paper comes from, but there's certainly something on the site that talks about that in that trainer resources. So have a look on there, and the paper's mentioned in there. How much information would you give and how much would you elicit when giving feedback to in-service teachers? Again, it depends on their experience, I suppose, doesn't it? So if you've got someone who's very experienced and is very open to feedback, then even if they're very experienced and they're very open and they want some input, then maybe we can't give them more input. But I think it definitely needs, the further you go down the experience line, the more it has to be a conversation. I'm working with some experienced Iranian teachers at the moment on a CELTA course, and that's an interesting one because they are all experienced, some are very experienced, and so I do see it as more of a conversation. But on the other hand, I'm saying, well, these are the hoops that you have to jump through in order to do very well on this course, as you should. Yeah, a couple of times you get to like it for sure. As I say, when we're running out of time, I'm aware of this and I've got to finish, but what I would really say to you is have a go and use Otter, because it opens things up. Suddenly it's not a mammoth unwieldy task to transcribe some, and you don't have to do the whole lesson. Do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I said lesson, and that's a sort of a Freudian slip. Do the whole feedback or lessons. I think this is useful to tell your teachers to do too. So I hope that you've found that a bit interesting. As I say, I'm just on time, so I'm thinking I'm going to have to finish. But I hope that I've encouraged you to have a go at that. Go on, put in the chat for me if you feel like you might have a go at this. You're kind of obliged to say yes, aren't you? But I hope you do. I might do it maybe, fair enough. It does take a bit of time, but I think it's really, really worthwhile, even if you only do a small bit. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference, and I hope that this was a good start for you, and I look forward to seeing you further on. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jo.